So, I mean, sort of slight warning, if it's this is usually a fairly family friendly show, but some of the things that we're going to have to speak about are really kind of quite unpleasant, and she really had a horrific experience during her time in Auschwitz Birkenau. So, tell us a little bit about how that came about and why what was the situation? Why did Auschwitz need a midwife?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Why? Um, Depending upon where in the war, there are either more women being sent to Auschwitz who are pregnant than at other times.
Mm.
So, like towards the end of the war, far more. There's no doubt about that. Um, but I think I was thinking a lot about this. How come so many women? And I think one of the things we tend to forget that in today's world, a lot of women actually are taking the pill. It might not be a nice thing to say to Catholics, but that is the truth of it. So at any one time, if you had a group of women um, today, not that many would be pregnant.
Mm.
In the 1940s, a much bigger proportion of women at any one time, would be pregnant. So anyway, so they were at various times either rounded up or because they were Jewish or all kinds of reasons why they would, or because they were political prisoners, and they would end up in Birkenau. So it's Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Birkenau part of the concentration camp was where more of the political prisoners were, where women were sent for longer periods of time. So they were not immediately sort of sent to the crematoria. Conditions in the camp were so bad that several barracks were put aside as what we would call hospital barracks, but they were nothing like what we would think of as a hospital. And although they were set up for something like 250 women in people to live there, but by the end we were looking at 600, 800. So I mean, the overcrowding was horrendous in these hospital barracks, and a few of the bunks by the door were put aside for pregnant women. That's how it was when Stanisława started off in 1943. That's how it looked like. So this Clara gets ill, and Stanisława heard about it. She had been in the camp not very long, maybe 6 weeks to 2 months. The first bit of which was in so-called quarantine, so wasn't yet forced to do a lot of labor. But she heard that the midwife was ill, and she actually just went up to one of the German physicians. We don't know which one. It's
Yeah, 'cause
never been
there's the
recorded.
famous Mengele was on.
Everybody
Yeah.
thinks it was Mengele. She got to know him, and he got to know her very well. But whether this was the one that she went up to, that is not clear. But she went up to this German physician, and she said, "Actually, I'm a midwife. I hear you need one." Somewhere it says, well, in the documents about her life, that she actually produced her diploma. I have problems actually. I think it must have been a little piece of paper, almost one of these like little
I guess a
ID
card
things.
or something. Yeah.
Really, how she couldn't have had a whole, but somehow she managed to preserve that little piece of paper. And as I mentioned actually in the book, I'm not sure that the physician was at all impressed by that piece of paper. She wasn't German. She didn't go to a German school. Only German midwives were the proper midwives. So he couldn't care less. But something in her resolve, in her approach, and he actually said okay. But what I think we have to really take on board is that you weren't allowed to approach these like stand out of line and say, "Hey, I want to talk." It didn't work like that. I mean, she could have been either shot on sight or sent to the gas chambers, or So somehow she just, obviously Our Lady and I, we would say heaven was working with her. This was meant to be. Anyway, he accepted her to do this work. But when we say do this work, what one has to understand, she was the only midwife. There was no substitute. There wasn't like, well, this is Wednesday, it's my day off. It was 24 hours a day for the next 2 years, non-stop. I mean, sometimes it was, 5 deliveries in a day, sometimes 6, sometimes none, sometimes 1, but it's non-stop every single day. This is what she did. The other women went and worked in the field or broke up stones or some stupid job the Nazis gave them.
I mean, the really kind of horrific part of the story, which she tells in her own testimony, which you've reproduced in the book, is that in essence she was helping deliver these children only for the children to then be essentially killed the next day.
Yes. So once the children were delivered, initially the first few months, until there was a change in the regulations, all Jewish children immediately were killed. Now, the head of the barrack, this capo, this person who directed the barrack, was hovering and would take the baby. And then Clara got better, and she was no longer the midwife, but she would take the baby, and they would just drown the baby in a pail of water. I mean, the whole thing is, we'd rather not think about it, but it must have been absolutely horrific for the mothers and for Stanisława and anybody that was witnessing all of this. So that was,
because she does mention that this was done in like the room next door, and you hear it.
You'd hear it, yeah. So that was the Jewish lady. Then the ruling changed. Or maybe it was all babies, and then the ruling changed that just the Jewish babies had to be killed immediately. Now, the other babies, although they weren't killed immediately, they ended up dying because of hunger, because there was no provisions for them. The mothers had no food. The mothers had no milk. It was just hopeless. The 30 odd babies, children that survived, that she delivered, only survived because it happened at the very end. And so liberation came just in time for the mums and for the babies.
There's a story which is particularly interesting and just shows Stanisława's kind of cleverness in that they would take for example, the sort of more Aryan-looking children, even the Polish one, and then send them off to other places around Germany or in Poland. But she would kind of tattoo a mark on them that she hoped would then be able to, if they survived, to be able to kind of recognize these children afterwards.
Indeed, yeah. That was the children, the babies were sent to Nakwa in the first instance, and then to other places. And I read somewhere that a couple or several children were reunited with their mothers, which would be interesting to kind of follow that lead up. I mean, you're not talking in the teens, you're talking about 5, 6, 7, but even so. Yeah.
So, I mean, the amazing sort of statistic that we hear from this story is that she delivered over those 2 years over 3,000 babies, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
What's that? That must be at least what 10, 5 a day at least,
5,
basically
6 a day.
5, 6 a day for 2 years, and that out of those, because she's asked at a certain point to give. There was a sort of obsessive record keeping in these prison camps, and she's asked at one point to give a kind of summary of all the children and the mothers who died in childbirth, and she kind of amazes the official by saying, "I haven't lost a single child or a single mother."
Yeah. That was actually to Mengele. Yeah, and he was absolutely furious. And Stanisława, when she was talking about this and retelling this whole story, said that she could just see his feet sort of dancing up and down, and people say, well, how come she was looking at his feet? And her son, Stanisław, says that it's because when she was thinking and concerned, her head would she would look down, so she was actually looking down at his feet. But he was absolutely furious, and he couldn't believe it. And he said even the best German obstetrical units don't have that kind of a record. But in her whole life, we are told, because she never said it was just in the camp, but in her whole career, she never lost a single mother or baby. I mean, if that is not a miracle, I don't know what is. But of course, from the church's perspective, the miracle that we need for her beatification has to be after her death.
Right.